Hey everyone, Tactics here, and in today's video I wanted to go over some of the patch notes we got just last night, specifically the dungeon tuning changes we saw, and kind of give you my perspective as a tank and as someone who's running, 17, 18 keys at the moment. We saw a bunch of dungeon nerfs in these notes, so I wanted to go over them and just give you guys some more context. Starting off, we have Manifestation of Pride now sees through stealth and invisibility effects. Now, I'm not 100% sure how this will interact with Shadow Meld. If you guys saw an MDI, a lot of teams would run out of range and then Shadow Meld to drop combat. I would think that that still works, just based on how this is worded, but obviously that'll need some testing. So if this does prevent the Shadow Meld skips of Prideful Affixes, it'll have some big impacts for MDI, but not much else. Otherwise, this isn't too much of a change. Then we have Plaguefall, the last boss, Margrave Stradama. Her little devoted ads, they have now 40% less health and damage. It's a pretty nice change, I would say. A little quality of life change. They weren't super impactful early on in the fight. They could get a little spooky near the end, but really, even near the end of the fight, you would just kind of try and keep them off to the side and CC them down, so you didn't have to damage them. The bigger thing, though, reduced cast frequency of Infectious Rain during her final phase. Previously, in her sub 30% phase, she would cast it a little faster, so this will be a nice change. Give healers a little breathing room in that last phase, because that dot really hurts, especially if you only have 1 or even 0 disease dispels, which is uncommon. And then lastly, adjusted the timing of the Plague Crash, so you just have a little bit more time to dodge tentacles. I'm sure everyone is happy with that. Even in our groups, we have people getting hit by those tentacles, so that'll always be nice little change. Sanguine Depths fixed an issue where flying chamber sentinels would fail to contribute to enemy forces requirements. I actually did hear about this. I haven't personally seen this, but yeah, this is just a bug fix to make that more consistent, so you can pull those flying guys in that last hallway. They kind of just fly by the tunnel. They'll now always give you percent, which is good, nice and consistent. Cryxus the Voracious got some nerfs. 20% severing smash damage in all difficulties, and 20% essence absorption damage in all difficulties. Or mythic difficulty, rather. This is pretty big. Honestly, personally, I think he was the scariest boss in there. I know a lot of people didn't like Tarvold, but after the Tarvold nerfs and once people kind of figured it out, I found that Cryxus was actually the harder boss in there. And I'm very happy for these nerfs. So this is the initial hit nerf of the big smash, and then this is the orb damage. So that's just a lot of party damage that gets mitigated now by this nerf. So that's very nice to see. It'll make Sanguine Depths in general just a lot nicer to step into. On top of this, Tarvold saw another nerf. On top of his Castigate nerf that was several weeks ago at this point. His Fleeting Manifestation, so the ad that pulses the big AoE damage, got a 20% health reduction, which is very nice. You'll be able to kill those a lot quicker now, and just get that damage stopped. So that's a good change, honestly. I'm happy with this change in Sanguine Depths. Overall, I think Sanguine Depths is a lot nicer now, especially on Tyrannical weeks, but even on Fortified weeks, a lot of people, like, we were kind of avoiding it even on Fortified weeks. It's just one thing we don't want to go into. I think it's still one of the harder dungeons, but this just in general makes it a lot more on pace with the other ones. We move on to Spires of Ascension, where the mini bosses on Davos's platform got some nerfs. So 1, they no longer trigger on death effects, so sanguine, so bolstering, those kind of things. And then 2, the Aura of Oppression now only increases damage taken by 1% per application instead of 2%. So it kind of halves your damage taken when that stacks up. That'll make this a little bit easier. I know those spears, the waves, get very scary very quickly. You should be dodging all the time, but sometimes you miss one. And if this stacking up can make that an insta one-shot very quickly. So this will be a nice little quality of life change. Makes your tank get trucked a little bit less, especially later on in the pull. But in general, yeah, it's a fine change. We struggled a little bit when we were double pulling them. We'll probably still double pull them, and this will make that a little easier. But yeah, I'm fine with this change. This is a fine change. Then we move on. We have Necrotic Wake. So, first, the Bloody Javelin discharged Anima Orb. They're soft, target capped at 8 enemies. So above 8 enemies, the damage is just evenly dispersed. That's fine. It stops some of those crazy pulls. in the necropolis that some people were doing, and just animal orbing them and just completely nuking them down. Kyrian armaments now persist through death. This is a really, really good change. A really good change. So previously, if you had these weapons and you died, they would just disappear. You would kind of be screwed if you wiped before like the second boss on Tyrannical, and you just lost all your weapons. That would be terrible. Things like that. So that's good. This change alone makes Necrotic Wake a lot easier. Just because you're able to now hold those weapons for exactly when you need them and not have to worry about, oh, what if I die and lose the weapon? Then we have crossbowman and warrior damage reduced. I didn't really see this as much of a problem. But this issue here, crossbowman's shots were ignoring armor. We did actually notice this. If you were watching the stream, we were actually rallying whenever we had that crossbowman pull, just because we were getting our plate wearers were getting absolutely trucked by them. We figured something was up. This is the bigger change here. This is nice. I mean, the warriors weren't really doing anything that we noticed, but the crossbowmen were a pain. But I think that this alone would fix that. So an extra 20% on top of that is just it seems a little excessive to me. I think this dungeon is going to be a lot easier now. Frostbolt Volley, damage reduced by 20% and higher cast time. And then their Frostbolt also has a damage reduced and a cast time increase. These guys, we didn't really deal with, we would CC all of them. So not much of a change here in general. They're just a lot easier to deal with if you don't CC them. And then we have the Corpse Harvester and Corpse Collectors. So a couple guys, I think they're present a little bit at the beginning and in the Necropolis. Just a pretty big health hit, 29%. So they're going to be a lot squishier now. We then have Stitched Vanguards health. Those are the spooky guys, I believe, at the beginning of the dungeon that kind of truck your tank. Health reduced by 14%. Nice little health nerf. They'll die a lot faster. Narzuda is that mini boss that everyone skips really, just before the bridge after the first boss. Health reduced by 20%. He might be worth now to pull. Personally, I think we'll probably still skip him just because we always have a priest in the group and it's very easy to just mind soothe and walk by him. But yeah, 20% health reduction. Might actually get pulled now. Skeletal Monstrosity, I believe that's the padding mini boss. Health reduced by 20%. Melee damage reduced by 25%. Again, might make him worth pulling, but I think for the most part, people are still going to skirt around the right side of that platform. Loyal Creation, health reduced by 24%. These are those tanky guys up in the Necropolis. They don't really do too much besides that little AoE around them. They're not very scary, but again, just more health reductions across the board. Finally, Kyrian Stitchworks. Now, these are the big spooky guys in the Necropolis, the big like patchwork type guys that absolutely chuck your tank, put the Tenderize debuff, and they mutilate. They had a 25% health reduction, so a big health reduction and a melee damage reduction by 17%. So that's a pretty big nerf to them. They'll be much easier to focus down, so that if you don't have like a taunt swap, like a plate DPS or like a hunter pet to get clear your tank stacks, it'll be much easier to just focus them down. Bosses, so Blightbone, the first boss actually saw a nerf, so the little worms now have 5 attacks they have to make before they trigger their eruptions instead of 3. Personally, we weren't having issues with this. We have a lot of CC though. I think it'll just make it a lot easier for pug groups that kind of are ignoring the mechanic. You can just kind of have melee help, but yeah, especially melee heavy groups. It'll be a little easier to nuke those worms down without them exploding. Then we have a Marth. So the skeletons are going to be summoned closer together. This is both a good and a bad thing. So we were trapping the mages here instantly on spawn. So if they're a little closer together, it could make it a little sketchier to trap them in case we accidentally CC break. But in general, I mean, some of those things were super far away, and it might make it easier to just not CC and just AoE them down in general now. So that's a nice little change. Unholy Frenzy, attack speed bonus reduced by 20%, just a little nerf to his Enrage. Crossbowman and Warrior reduced damage. Mage's Frostbolt reduced damage. And Frostbolt Volley. This must be the regular Frostbolt, sorry. Here. But a cast time increase and reduced damage. So again, just general nerfs across the board to all those adds. Make the boss a little bit easier. Hopefully, but normally, personally, I didn't think it was the maybe the crossbowman damage, but the warriors again, they didn't seem to be bothering at least the tank too much. So I'm not fully sure why they also got nerfed, but again, it's just kind of an across the board thing. Finally, Surgeon Stitchflesh, the little puddles he puts on the ground, will now eventually despawn after a minute instead of 6 minutes, which basically means they never despawned. Yeah, that personally, this boss dies pretty quick anyways, because you try and one phase, maybe two phase with the quick hook. On fortified weeks, and on tyrannical weeks it takes you, I think, at least a couple. So on tyrannical weeks it'll help, but on fortified weeks this doesn't really change too much. In general, I think Necrotic Wake got some heavy nerfs. I don't know if it was needed. Personally, I think Necrotic Wake was kind of like a mid-tier dungeon in terms of difficulty. With all these nerfs, I honestly think, I mean, especially these Kyrian Armaments nerf, having them persist through death. I mean, they should have probably always persisted through death. But this little quality of life change alone, I think Necrotic Wake might be one of the easiest dungeons now. Maybe a little hot take, but I think this is now one of the easiest dungeons of the 8 Shadowlands dungeons. It's got to be up there. I would have liked to see some more changes to the other side over these Necrotic Wake changes, because I still think that's, in general, just a more difficult dungeon. But hey, maybe we'll see some in the coming weeks. But that is it for the dungeon nerfs in these notes. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe for more Warcraft content like it. Also, make sure you guys keep an eye out on my channel for some future videos. In particular, I'm going to be putting out a series on how to get Keystone Master in Shadowlands Season 1, going over routes, tips, and tricks for all 8 Shadowlands dungeons. If you want to keep up to date with me, you can follow me on Twitter or check me out on Twitch, both at Tactics. But that's it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.